really hard for emerging writers, isn't it? Because it is sensible to see what's selling, but equally what's selling now isn't necessarily going to be selling in, a year's time or 2 years' time.
Hello and welcome to this week's episode of The Conversation with your host Nadine Matheson. As always, I hope that you're well and I hope that you're enjoying your week. And I love saying, I hope that you're enjoying the summer, because I cannot think of a better time of year. I actually think that summer is my favourite time of the year, and I hope that you're all enjoying it. And as I look at my calendar, I realise that there are only 3 weeks of The Conversation left. So we've got this week after, and then the week after that. And even though I feel a bit sad that it's just the end, well, not quite the end, but we're coming up to the end of season 3, I'm really excited about season 4 because I already have amazing guests lined up for season 4. So this will never be goodbye because there will always be more. And this week, if you happen to be at Harrogate or the Feakston Oh Peculiar Crime Writing Festival taking place from the 17th to the 20th, I sound hesitant, but I know those are the dates. But if you are going to be at Harrogate, I will be there also. So if you see me, say hi. And I'm looking forward to it. Right, let's get on with the show, because today I'm in conversation with Sunday Times bestselling author Clare Mackintosh, whose new novel, Other People's Houses, is out now. And in our conversation, Clare Mackintosh and I talk about authors being the CEOs of their careers, the challenges of writing a series, and the moment Clare Mackintosh knew she was writing a good book. Now, as always, sit back, we'll go for a walk and enjoy the conversation. Clare Mackintosh, welcome to The Conversation.
Thanks for having me.
Right, I'm kind of going to read your bio from the back of your latest book, and then I have a follow-up question. So do your very good, yes, like I've been nominated for an Oscar.
All right.
Okay, so Clare Mackintosh is a police officer turned crime writer and the multi-award winning author of 7 Sunday Times best-selling novels, translated into 40 languages. Her books have sold more than 2 million copies worldwide and have spent a combined total of 68 weeks in the Sunday Times bestseller chart. So my follow-up questions, I was like, wow, that's impressive. But my follow-up question was, when you think back to your debut, because I let you go, unless you're going to tell me that I'm wrong, it came out 10 years ago.
Yeah,
in 2015. So I was thinking, what were you hoping for when you wrote
I can tell you that exactly. I have such a specific answer to this. Because, and the reason I remember this really vividly, because I remember my agent looking at me sort of with kind of in stunned silence, because one of the first questions I asked was, what does success look like?
And you asked that?
Yes, because I came from the police where things were very data driven, and certainly at sort of the level I was working, it was important to know the stats. Like, what are we aiming for? What are our crime reduction targets? And so it made sense to me that in this new job of mine in publishing, one would know what one was aiming for. I know now that no one ever tells you what they're aiming for. And so to me, the logical thing is that a publisher would say, right, this is the book we're publishing. This is, the number of copies we're expecting to sell. This is the return we're expecting. This is what we're expecting you to earn from it. And I know they have those conversations internally, but they don't tell authors it. Right. So I said to my agent, okay, what does success look like? And once she laughed a little bit, she said, it's really hard to tell with a debut. We're really, this is the start of a career. She said, honestly, it's actually better not to have a massive selling debut because you've got no other books. You've got no backlist, so readers have got nowhere else to go. Much better to sort of build a slow and steady career, maybe break out on book 5 or 8. That is a great thing to happen. So we were really setting expectations low. The deal had been small. In fact, I don't mind sharing it. So I signed a 2-book deal for £15,000. So I let you go effectively 7.5 books. Yeah. So I let you go £7,500, which I couldn't live on, but was still a really amazing thing for me. This was someone who was prepared to pay me for my book. So it was, it's a huge confidence giver, isn't it?
Yeah.
And so my agent said, look, if a debut sells around 5,000 copies, between 5 and 10,000, we would be really pleased with that. That would be a solid start for a completely unknown writer. So I sort of took that number, thought about it, and thought, okay, I know what my target is. My personal target for this book is 50,000 copies. This was in paperback. It didn't have a hardback, went straight to paperback. So I wanted to sell 50,000 copies because I figured I don't know 50,000 people. My mum can't fit 50,000 copies in her loft. 50,000 copies means a bunch of strangers has bought this book. And so that was my target. I obviously had limited control over this target, but it really helped me knowing what I was aiming for. And then it just went absolutely bananas. It came out in ebook first, actually, ebook and trade paperback, and the ebook came a bit of a kind of word of mouth. I'm not going to say sensation; it wasn't that big, but there was a momentum to it. And then the game changer was getting a Richard and Judy pick, and that changed everything, changed the course of my career, really. And so that we discovered, so the ebook had come out in the November 2014, and we found out about R&J in February 2015. It was going to be published in paperback in April. And so then, of course, everything changed. There was suddenly a big marketing push. The print run was extended. The sell-in was bigger. Just everything changed. And slowly, the numbers crept up. And eventually it had sold 1 million copies.
I don't think I've ever spoken to anyone on this podcast where I've had to ask the question that were you surprised at how the publishers and like the marketing team and the publicity team, how their strategy changed once they realized that you weren't just going to be, no offense, but like a 15 grand, 2 books, or 7.5 grand a book.
I don't think I can answer that because I don't know what it would have been like without R&J. I know what it was like just in ebook, and I know I felt peculiarly, that's a hard word to say, flat. Having spoken to lots of authors, I know this is quite common, that your publication week comes and you don't have a book in the shops. And, in my case, this was because it was just in ebook at that point. So there would never have been any books in. But actually the same applies for many, many authors who haven't managed to get slots in supermarkets, maybe a few local shops are stocking, but basically we're talking about online retailers. And so it felt a bit flat and a bit of an anticlimax after such a long time working on the book. But I didn't know what, I had no point of comparison. I didn't know what a marketing plan would look like for, a 7.5 grand deal versus a 70,000 deal. I've seen the difference over time because my deals are a bit more than that now, happily, and very grateful I am for them. So of course I've seen that marketing spend go up. I've seen, a lot more publicity, attention. But none of us know what anyone else's experience is, do we?
No, you go into it so blind. And I've said it repeatedly, like on this podcast, is that when you've had another career, so writing is not your main, hasn't been your main job. So you've had another career, but you know what to expect. And let's say I'm just using being a lawyer, being a police officer as an example. You know that, okay, I need to do this application. This is going to be the training process. And then once I've trained, I know these are my options. So you're guided at each single step, and there's people around you. who can advise you and help you. There's mentors. There's just people there. Whereas you do this, right? I don't know why I'm pointing at my desk, but you do this writing job, and you're like, you're on your own. You know nothing. Even when you sign, I think you have your agent there, but you're still relatively learning as you go.
You are, of course you are. The one thing I would say is that I think it's really important for authors to take control of their careers and to see themselves as the CEO of their own company. So that, for me, that translates to giving myself training, investing in my business, identifying where my skills gaps are, and finding training that will address them. And if that training doesn't exist, then I will create it. So when I first left the police and I was writing I Let You Go, and I think I signed quite soon after, but there was a big delay before publication. Basically, I had no money and I needed to earn. And so I was doing a lot of other types of writing. And I just approached it like a career shift, like if I'd been changing jobs from policing to being a teacher, there would have been a really clear career structure in place, like, go and do a GCE, and I don't really know what the structure is, but you'd follow those steps. And so I did the same. I created a plan for my career change, which involved, okay, I'm going to do some copywriting for businesses. I'm going to do some freelance journalism. What do I need? I need to learn how to pitch. I need to learn how to generate ideas, how to write an article, all those sorts of things. And I just followed the steps. And similarly, there have been things I've wanted to learn about the business. So I wanted a really solid understanding of marketing. But all the courses I found online were a bit generic, or I would have spent kind of all day having content of which only maybe 10% was what I needed. And that doesn't represent good value to me. So I approached someone who I knew was, really good at marketing within the publishing industry. And I said, okay, this is what I'm looking for. How many people do I need to get in a room for you to make it cost effective for you to deliver some training for us? And I put together a 1-day training package and then, split that basically with a bunch of other writers, which meant that I got exactly the training I wanted. It was great for other people who also wanted that training, but I wasn't paying for something I didn't need. And so I do that all the time. And yes, it is hard because we don't know everything, but you don't know everything in any job, do you? You go in to a career, the kind of the core structure of it, and then you're learning on the job and you're getting better at it. And so I think just as we get better at the craft of writing, and we do that through reading and being edited and, just practicing all the time, so we get better and more savvy at the business side of being an author.
I've always said that. I remember the first day I qualified as a solicitor, which would have, we're in June now. So so it's 19 years ago. And I remember my first day I walked into court. And bearing in mind, I said, you've done the training. So the academic side of it. And I walked into court and I didn't even have much to do. It was the most straightforward. I think it was a Section 6 hearing back then, a committal hearing. So all I had to do is say yes. It's ready to go up to the Crown Court. That was literally all I had to do. But I walked into the courtroom, looked around, and I said, I don't know what I'm doing. I don't know anything. Like I've made a mistake. But it's, as you said, you'll always feel those initial insecurities, but you do learn on the job every single day. You learn something. Yeah. And I think also, I was listening to you, when I think back to when I self-published my first book, I feel like that was probably my apprenticeship, because I recognized very early on what my skill sets are and what I know I can do, and what I knew I've either got no interest in doing it and I need to find someone who can do this for me. So in a sense, I kind of had like my little apprenticeship in publishing before I got a traditionally publishing deal.
I have so much respect for independently published authors. A successful indie author has got to have the full gamut of of skills, not necessarily to do everything themselves, but the skill to recognize what needs doing and then make that assessment about whether or not they can do it themselves, whether it's, worth their time, their money, whether they've got the ability or whether they're outsourcing. It's a very different business, and they've got to write the books as well, and often write 6 times as fast as those of us in traditional publishing who are generally writing a book a year.
Yeah, I always say when you're self-published, independently published, writing's the easy bit. It's the most straightforward part of the whole process. The work comes in well, and not even finding a coverized, that's straightforward enough. And finding an editor, it's like, now I need to work on a marketing plan. Now I need to work on a publicity plan, and I need to know the difference between marketing and publicity. Now there's so many things. So yeah, it's hard work.
It is, yeah, it is. There's a bit of me that would really like to self-publish.
Really?
Because I love the business side of things. I love the marketing and the PR, and the control, I suppose. And sometimes, because I do a lot of marketing myself, sometimes I sort of think, I'm doing a lot of what I would be doing if I was self-published, but I'm not getting the royalty rate that I would be getting if I was self-published. But there are an awful lot of things I'm not doing that I have a fantastic publishing house doing for me. And also I cannot write fast enough to be an indie author.
Yeah.
I don't think I know any indie authors who only produce a book a year. And frankly, I find it hard enough to do that.
I can't remember who I was speaking to, but I've spoken to an indie author on here, and I think he's putting out 3 books in the year. And I'm like, how? I'm managing to get 1 book a year. The idea of getting 3 books, not only just a first draft written, but edited and ready to go. So no one's coming back at you and saying there's a whole giant plot missing in the second act.
No, it's a relentless schedule, isn't it?
Yeah.
This year I'm writing a novella as well as my sort of contracted book. Well, they're both contracted, but the day job book is my full length thriller, and the novella is only 30,000 words, and it just trying to sort of fit that in. So I will manage it. It's due in another month, and I'm about halfway through, so it's it's sort of achievable, but I couldn't do a full-length novel as well.
No, I think it's madness. Commendable. but madness. Claire, when did you realise you could write? And always saying that, not only just write, but tell a story.
Sort of forever, honestly. I think a lot of writers know that they can write, in the same way that kids know whether they're good at football or music or maths. Very occasionally you get young people, kids who love something but are terrible at it, but it's quite rare. Normally the things you love are the things you're good at, and vice versa. It's sort of, they fuel each other because you want to do them, and so you practice them. So I knew as a kid that telling stories in all their forms actually was what I was good at. I was very good at drama. I did a lot of amdram and sort of performances, dance, ballet tap, all sorts of things. And it was all to do with storytelling. And writing in particular was something that I loved and wanted to do. And as I got older, it grieves me slightly that nobody in my secondary school, no sort of adult, no teacher, pointed me towards a creative career. I don't really understand it. So I went to a very academic school where they really sort of nurtured their Oxbridge kind of candidates, and I was not that. And I just sort of bimbled along in the middle. I was just quite average. But amongst all the careers advice, no one sort of said, "Oh, have you thought about journalism?" Or just nothing. I think I did one of those ridiculous computer career questionnaires where it must have been like really early computers where you answered questions and it sort of spat out a job. And it said librarian, which, you know, is fine, except that I didn't know anything about the structure of librarian careers. And I don't think then they were quite as, you know, nowadays I know librarians who have master's degrees and all sorts. So I think it was a very basic, oh, you like books, you should work in a library. And because I didn't know anyone who worked in creative fields, it didn't occur to me that there were jobs. I mean, I feel a bit dense now thinking that, like, obviously.
No, but it's not unusual for anyone to say that on here.
You know, all the grown-ups I knew worked in, but they had proper jobs, inverted commas. They were doctors, lawyers, they worked in Tesco, they were office managers, they were teachers. You know, they had jobs that they went to kind of 9 to 5, Monday to Friday. They didn't paint pictures, they didn't dance. They just didn't do those creative things. They certainly didn't write books. And so it never once crossed my mind. And I had no idea what I was going to do. And it stressed me out, actually. My older sister had wanted to be a teacher since she was about 4 and used to make my sister and me sit and have like maths lessons at the weekend. I know. And she never, ever deviated and has now been a teacher for like 30 years. So I felt quite inferior that I had no idea what I wanted to do and just kind of bimbled. So I did A-levels that I liked, English, French and German, really to read the books and to talk about the books and write about the books. So I did that in 3 different languages, which I loved. Went to university to do French and German, to do more of the same, you know, just sort of language, had no idea about a career. But I'd spent a gap year in Paris and was very fluent in French and had just sort of temporarily forgotten all my German in the way that you do if you're immersed in one language. And again, I think kind of bad advice, really. I went to see someone in admissions at university my first week and went, I can't speak German anymore. And German had been my really strong subject at school. I was really good at A-level. And she went, oh, just switch. Whereas I think probably if I just stuck it out, you know, my German would have come back and I'd have been fluent in both. So I panic switched to business studies, having never done it before, like proper panic choice, because it was, I think I'd gone there the last sort of day that you were allowed to switch. And so
you might want to have done architecture.
I mean, what was I thinking? Or English. Or drama. Like, what was I thinking? Oh, I know what I'll do. I'll do a business degree. But I was so worried about what job I was going to get. What am I going to get, you know, with a French degree? What I didn't understand, and that I tell my kids, so my kids are doing A-levels at the moment, and what I tell them all the time is, do not think, unless you know for certain what career you want, do not try and sort of reverse engineer anything. Pick the subjects you love. Nobody cares what degree you've got. No one cares what A-levels you've chosen. They just want you to have them if they're necessary for the next step of your career. So what would have been lovely is for someone to have said, well, let's think about, what do you really love? Oh, you really love words and stories and storytelling. Brilliant. Let's do an English literature degree. Anyway, so I did French and business, and the only thing I would say about that is that in hindsight, I think it switched on a bit of my brain that I didn't know existed, that I now use all the time. That kind of business savvy marketing instinct that maybe I might never have discovered. And so even though there were bits of that degree that I hated so much, I would almost be in tears at the prospect of going to a lecture. You know, I did not want to learn about production techniques in Japan. What was I doing there? I hated global economics, and I don't know my times tables. Like I cannot do maths. I cannot put 2 numbers together and make it make sense. So I really, really struggled. I had to work incredibly hard for about half of that management degree, and the other half I just loved, because publicity, marketing, it was storytelling, you know. And so I don't don't regret it, but I think I would have had a much better time doing English or drama or linguistics or something else.
Everything you said, it's just like it's either triggering off a memory of mine, or it's just reinforcing the same thing. Like I say, any of the kids around me in my family, like if I'm talking to my godchildren, nieces, nephews, cousins, and they're like, "Oh, what should I do at uni?" And I said, "I'd rather you spend 3 years at uni doing something that you enjoy, because that degree is not going to tie you into whatever you then decide to is going to be your career later on in life." I say, so it wasn't for the fact I completely messed up my A levels because I got bored, and I didn't do law, but I did history, and I just loved history, and I wanted to do American studies because I was basically obsessed with the place, and I did it. And no, I loved my degree. It was the best. And I also knew I could do a conversion course later on and then become a solicitor. But also, I think it was about a month ago, maybe 2 months ago, I was in my cupboard and I found my old school reports when I was 14, 15. And it's the same thing you were saying. It's like, you know what you enjoy. You know books. I know my creativity. My English teachers, they're saying, she's so creative. Her writing is good. You can hear the characters when they're talking. And you're like, well, if you can see all that, you should have said be a writer.
Yeah.
No one ever did.
No, and I'm not saying that if someone had said, "Oh, you should write a book," I'm not saying I would have done at that particular point, or that it would have been any good. Yeah. Because actually, I think it's the life experience that it has made me the writer I am. But I think it might have planted a seed.
Yeah.
And yeah, I did carry on writing a little bit. And actually I wrote when I was living in Paris the first time. So I spent 2 years in Paris. And the first time I was there, I wrote most of a novel. I wrote a novel. I was obsessed with George Orwell's Down and Out in Paris and London. And I was working as a hotel receptionist in one of those hotels where people sometimes don't stay longer than an hour. And that just kind of blew my mind. I mean, I was at the time, so I was I just turned 18, and summer baby, sheltered summer baby from the home counties, went off to Paris, fiercely independent, would not sort of take any money from my parents. I was going to do this on my own, and got this job. And honestly, it took me, I don't know, like maybe 2 months to work out why people would check in and then like go after an hour. I was so naive. Anyway, so I started writing a book then, which had a working title of Baguettes and Brothels. And I really, really loved it. I loved that feeling of putting together something that was much bigger than anything I'd done before. I'd written short stories and terrible poetry, and I did a lot of kind of pen pictures, I suppose. I used to watch, have you ever watched Alan Bennett's Talking Heads?
Yeah.
And so I used to watch those. My parents used to love them. And so because, we had one TV and that's
everyone watched it.
Everyone watched it, right? So I would watch them, but I loved it. And what I loved about it was the subtext in these monologues, like you'd have, an elderly woman talking to camera about how, of course she doesn't mind that her son doesn't come and visit. He's terribly busy doing his terribly important job. And underneath it, you've got this incredible pathos about how desperately lonely she is. And I loved the subtlety of how you could say one thing, but actually the reader or the viewer could interpret it in a different way. So I used to write a lot of those, a lot of disconnected monologues. But this novel I started writing in Paris was the first time I tried to fit a big sort of arc into a piece of work. And I didn't manage it. I didn't finish that book. I've got no idea where it is. But it was the sort of, I suppose, the beginning of that ambition to write a novel.
Listeners, it's time for a very short break. If you're enjoying this conversation with Nadine Matheson and want to help keep the podcast going, why not buy me a cup of coffee? Your support goes such a long way in keeping these conversations flowing. Just check out the link in the show notes. did you end up in the police then? Because it wasn't like you wasn't writing. You know, like I always say is that they'll talk about, oh, this is your second career. So writing's your second career. And you can always pinpoint when you've decided to, okay, I'm now going to write. But you were always writing and it was always there. So how did you end up in the police force?
This is just such an embarrassing story. It makes me out to be the biggest idiots that you will wonder what on earth the police thought they were doing taking me on. So I was in my final year, French and management, still didn't know what I wanted to do, really starting to panic about the pressure of what I was going to do after I graduated. And so I went to all the sort of careers fairs and looking at brochures, and I thought, and a lot of the people I did my management degree with, because it was 50-50, and, you know, my French cohort were much more sort of arty, and the management ones were really quite kind of driven and serious. And so I did feel often like I was being split in two. And a lot of my management peers were going to be management consultants. And I was like, I could be a management consultant, I suppose. I had done my second gap year so my third year at uni was back in Paris, but not in a dodgy hotel this time. It was working as a bilingual PA in a commercial property firm. So I'd had a bit of sort of business experience, and I was starting to quite enjoy it. This was managing pension portfolios, business property portfolios. And so I was like, okay, a management consultancy, they earn lots of money. I've got the degree for it. That feels like a good fit. So I thought I'll go to a lecture delivered by Anderson Consulting and about their graduate program. And we'll see what that's like. So I was late for it. I was often late for things back then. And I couldn't find the room because I wasn't really au fait with the management block. I just, went to a few management lectures as I could. Got to the room 5 minutes after it started. The doors like slammed open with this horrible big kind of crash, and everyone stopped talking, and I went up the raped seats, and it was just all, terribly embarrassing and awkward and disruptive. Sat down at the back of the room, and when I looked up, there was a police officer at the back of the room, at the front of the room. And for a second, I thought, oh my gosh, these management consultants earn so much money. They've got to bring the police.
And they got to bring security.
But no, I was in the wrong room. So I had accidentally come into a room where the Home Office were there delivering a lecture on joining the police graduate program. And I because I was so British and awkward, I couldn't leave then because I'd made some work coming in late. So I sat there, listened to this lecture, and then had a police career. I'm just very susceptible. The thing that did it though, I know. Imagine if I'd gone into a room like of circus performers. I mean, I could be.
You would have been on Blackheath Common near me.
I could have been. But I tell you what did it for me. There were a couple of things. One was that it was a very, very basic, low-tech 90s PowerPoint presentation, which had a series of photographs of different jobs that police officers do. It's a bit like a kind of Lady Bird book. Here is a police officer on a horse at a riot. Here is a police officer helping an old lady across the road. All these different jobs. Here's our detective. I'm
laughing because it reminds me of when I think it was 16 and Careers Day in the Royal Navy came to our school, and it's the same thing. They do the slideshow, but they just show you the good bits, and they're like, "Oh, here they are jumping off a cliff."
Yes, I mean what they should have. Yeah, what they should have had is, here is a police officer whose marriage has broken down. Here is a police officer who can no longer sleep because of the awful but they didn't have that. They had all the good shiny bits, and I have always had a real sort of problem with attention span. I get bored very easily. I need new sort of stimulus. A lot of me was quite worried about the idea of just doing one job for the rest of your life. I mean, I cannot think of anything worse. And one of the things I liked about the idea of being a management consultant, which ironically I think I probably would have been quite good at, was the idea of coming into a business, working out where the problems are, troubleshooting them, and then pissing off and leaving someone else to carry on actually making it work. So that sounded quite fun. And so suddenly I was being presented with a career where there were multiple jobs within one career. And that was quite exciting. The other thing that suddenly sort of happened is that I had been wrestling a little bit with the idea of doing something that was all about making money, nothing else. And my father was a doctor, a hospital director in the NHS for his whole career. And I think I just sort of have that kind of desire to serve. And that police presentation sort of consolidated that for me. And then the icing on the cake was so I've got quite a competitive streak. And at the end of this presentation, they said, right, this is, that's everything we've got to tell you about this amazing career. We're here to talk about the graduate program. We are expecting between 2,000 and 5,000 applications this year. We will be taking between 10 and 15 graduates. So here is the graduate form, and here are the forms for standard entry. So, we advise you to apply for both if you're interested. And I just took the graduate form and applied and became one of 12 graduates that they took that year nationwide on what used to be the accelerated promotion scheme. And that is how I accidentally became a police officer.
Oh my God, I think it's the best story. It wasn't so not what I was expecting, but it's the best story. Because I think I came home from school that day and said, "Oh, Mum, I might join the Royal Navy." And she's like, "No, you're not." I'm like, "You can go on holiday. You can go around the world." Then I go to beach, and she's like, "No, you're not. You're not joining the Royal Navy."
They do a good sales pitch, don't they? These forces.
That's how they get you so young, because they do a really, really good sales pitch. Claire, when you was writing your debut, I'll let you go. Was there a point in that process? And I'm going to ask you about, because I'm looking at the time, I'm going to ask you about your latest book. But was there a point in that process where you realised, did it occur to you, I think this is good? I think this might be the one? Or were you just, let me just write it and just see?
No. Do you know, I've only had that feeling once, and it's with next year's book. That kind of, because again, it goes back to what we were saying at the beginning about not really knowing anything about the business. I didn't really know anything about what was a good book. So I was really excited about it because of the twist. And over the course of writing it, so it was about sort of 2 years of editing it with my publisher, I got less and less confident in it. Even though the book I could see was getting better and better, I got less confident in the twist because I'd seen it so often and it felt like the most obvious thing ever. And so I had a tiny little moment similar, I suppose, to what you're asking, when my editor said, "Okay, I hear you. You're worried about the twist landing. Let's send it to 2 authors. So we won't send loads of proofs out yet. We'll send it to 2 authors. And we'll just let them read it blind, and we'll see." That's an odd metaphor, without knowing what it's about. And we'll see what they think. And we sent it to Peter James and Mark Billingham.
Oh my God! It's not like you sent it to, I don't know, Paul down the pub.
No. And the reason we sent it to those 2 is I had 2-3 years previously, I had set up a literary festival in my then hometown of Chipping Norton, and didn't know anything about publishing or lit fests, or I wasn't writing a novel then. I just wanted there to be a lit fest in my town. And because there wasn't one, I set one up. And one of the, and in that first year, Mark Billingham and Peter James had come to the lineup. And so I had, I didn't know them well at all. They weren't friends, but I had enough of a connection to be able to say, I've got a debut coming out. Would you read it? And they very kindly said yes. Mark emailed me, I think just a few days after getting this proof, and said, what a twist. I am green with envy. And I thought, that's it.
That's all you need.
I've nailed the twist. And so that, I suppose, that's when I kind of thought, okay, maybe I really have written a good book. But I think we doubt ourselves, don't we, with every book? It always feels impossible that we can pull it off again.
Yeah, because, like when I read out your bio in the beginning, and it's so extensive and so impressive. But even though you've got what number book is this? Is it not
so
7?
This is number 8.
8.
Yeah. Other people's houses is number 8. But do you know what I would say though is it is impressive. It does sound impressive. But so I've sold about 3 million copies.
Yeah.
But over 1 million of those are I Let You Go. And so then actually you're talking about 2 million split across the other 7. So it suddenly becomes, not that it's not brilliant. I'm really pleased with every single one of those sales, but it's, I Let You Go is doing a lot of work.
Heavy lifting. Yeah,
absolutely. And I'm comfortable with that. I read. Have you ever read Big Magic by Elizabeth Gilbert?
Yes.
So I love Big Magic. Listen to it at least once a year on audio. And one of the things she talks about is how Eat, Pray, Love was obviously this phenomenal worldwide sensation. And, I Let You Go is obviously nowhere near that. But how people are always saying to her, gosh, I bet you wish you could write another Eat, Pray, Love. And does it feel really hard, trying to live up to it? And she talks about how you just need to make your peace with the fact that actually that might be your best work. It might be your best creatively. It might be your best seller. You don't have to match up to that. It is, this is a long-term career, a long-term investment. It's not about the quick wins.
Yeah, I think that's what I was going to say, that even though this is your 8th book, there is a reason why every book, you'll never feel like 100% safe with it, because you are kind of starting again and you want it to be successful. So you're going to have all, like those first night nerves. You're always going to have that with each book that you write and then is published.
You are, of course you are. And you're moving the goalposts all the time. So I was thinking about this morning, actually, about knowing I was speaking to you, and I'd gone to the gym and I was putting my weights up, as I do, I suppose, every couple of weeks, increasing the reps, increasing the weights. If I just kept those the same, I wouldn't get any better. And, every workout would be the same and it would be boring. And so every single book, you are pushing yourself. A good writer is pushing themselves to be better. It is part of the unwritten contract between the writer and the reader that, I pledge to do my absolute best to give you something different, better, more exciting than the last book I gave you.
Yeah. I think there's someone asked me, I can't remember when it was, asked me a few months ago what I'd learned from doing these interviews, these conversations. And I said, I think it's been mainly, especially in the last 6 months, is just being brave with your writing, because it's when you're being brave with your writing that you're pushing yourself and that you're making yourself, you are becoming better as a writer. And I said, if I've taken anything on board for all of these conversations, I think that has been one of the number one things, just being brave. And everyone has the same concerns.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's difficult to be brave because the publishing industry doesn't always want brave. And, lots of authors want to mix up genres a bit, or, try something a little bit new, and can sometimes be discouraged. I Let You Go was rejected a lot by publishers for the same reason. And the reason given was, this feels like, I'm quoting this particular one, this was one publisher, for some reason it's imprinted in my mind, this feels like an uncomfortable mashup of women's fiction and police procedural, and I cannot see where we would position it in the market. So that would have been 2013, something like that.
Yeah.
Now I would say that nowadays, that uncomfortable mashup of women's fiction and police procedural is exactly what sells, actually. And what that is domestic suspense, which wasn't really a thing in the sort of 2009-10, but very much was a thing a few years later, with The Girl on the Train and Gone Girl, Before I Go to Sleep, all those sorts of books, and has continued to be a trend. So yeah, being a bit brave can be quite hard, but you're right, it's what improves our writing.
Do you think when you are talking to like new writers, and I don't want to say aspiring writers, because once you're writing, but new ones, they're trying to get their books, just trying to get through, get an agent, do you like try and reinforce that to them? Because sometimes they can be fixated on, well, it needs to be this sort of book because that's what's in the charts right now, or I need to emulate this sort of writer because these are the writers who are successful. So what do you say to them?
It's really hard for emerging writers, isn't it? Because it is sensible to see what's selling, but equally what's selling now isn't necessarily going to be selling in a year's time or 2 years' time. What I tend to do is try and encourage them to sort of pull out of those books the ingredients that makes it so good. So I always advise people to read outside their genre. So look at the top 10 on Amazon, top 10 on Sunday Times. Read all of them and work out what has put those books in the top 10. Now, sometimes what's put that book there is a celebrity name, or it's a massive marketing spend. But sometimes it's a much loved series. And if it's a much loved series, then what is it about that? Is it the setting? Is it the character? If it's fantasy, is it the creation of the world? Just pin down what is it that makes that book so great, and that's the takeaway that you want for your own story.
All right, so because I'm very much aware of the time, Claire, because it just always speeds past, would you like to tell the listeners of the conversation about, I'm holding it up, Other People's Houses, and then I'm going to ask you some questions, your last set of questions.
Other People's Houses can be read as a standalone. It is the third in a little series set on the border between North Wales and Cheshire, featuring Welsh-speaking detective DC Ffion Morgan and her English counterpart, DS Leo Brady. It starts with the body of an estate agent found in an upturned kayak. This is purely because I was gazumped about 10 years ago, and I've never forgiven the estate agent who dealt with it. So I murdered one. Apologies to the ethical estate
That's
agents.
why we write.
Both of you. So Ffion is dealing with a murdered estate agent in Wales across the border. Leo is dealing with a series of high-value burglaries in a kind of a sort of waggy area of Cheshire, really rich neighbourhood. I love writing about very rich people behaving appallingly and ultimately getting their comeuppance. That's one of my favourite subsets of society to deal with.
Okay, so 2 questions following on from that. So, did you face any challenges in writing Other People's Houses?
Yes, I mean lots, but specifically because I think series books are really hard. I've got so much respect for people who have written long-running series. I honestly thought it would be easier than writing standalones. Because you've got your characters already, you've got your world, you just throw another mystery at them. But I don't find it that way at all, because actually you've got your universe, but you are creating another world. It's not the same world, because if it was, you'd just be killing off all the same people and it would be like Midsummer Murders. So you are creating new characters and new worlds. And on the flip side, you're hidebound by things that you introduced in previous books. So you can't change people's ages. The geography is where it is. I keep wanting to sort of have Ffion nip back to the station to do a quick interview. And I can't, because the geography means that she's 45 minutes away and like it's an hour and a half in the car round trip. And that's the reality of rural policing. But it doesn't work for my story sometimes. I gave Fionn a dog in book 2, and it absolutely was the bane of my life in book 3. Because I would get halfway through a chapter and then I'd be like, well, who's got the fucking dog? Like, no
I
one
got
can.
asked.
It's so annoying. And you can't take it away, can you?
I can't remember if it was an editor comment or a copy edit. It was some kind of comment I got in my edits. And it was like, oh, I'm so glad to see the dog because Henley has a dog. And like, we haven't seen the dog since page whatever. And I was like,
no, because like you've got work to do and you can't look after the sodding dog. I got halfway through the book and I thought, this is so difficult. In my real life, I have 3 teenagers, 3 spaniels and a goat to look after on the daily. And now I've saddled myself with a fictional dog as well.
It's a lot. So Claire, if you could spend an afternoon with any of your characters, whom would you choose and why?
Definitely Fionn, in a heartbeat. Yeah. She is, I wouldn't want to spend a lot of time with her. Like I wouldn't want to work with her. I would want to go on holiday with her, but I'd have a night out with her in Cumcoed, which is the small Welsh town where she lives and works. And I think she'd be a lot of fun. She's very stubborn. She's quite impetuous, but that can be quite fun on a night out. So yeah, definitely Fionn.
Yeah. A night out's enough. You're not doing a week.
Yeah, a night out or a swim. I might go swimming with her. She and I both swim in the lake. So yeah, we might go for a cold water swim. That would be fun.
Okay. Right, now we're doing your final. We're doing your final 4 questions. Yeah, you're not going to do a week in Marbella with a.
Oh no, that would be.
Okay, Claire, are you an introvert or extrovert or a hybrid of the 2?
I am an introvert. Well, hybrid. I don't know. I'm one of those people who super sociable, but needs to shut the door and recharge and do not speak to me.
Okay. So what challenge or experience, I say good or bad, in your life shaped you the most?
Oh, a sobering one. The death of my son. So my son died 18 years ago, and it was a catalyst for doing what I want to do, really, for writing, for pushing boundaries, for being brave. Just, I think it fundamentally changed who I am and what I want out of life.
Claire, that's what led to your... it's not a memoir, but it's like your non-fiction.
Yeah. I wrote. I don't know what it is really. It's sort of published under memoir. It's called "I Promise It Won't Always Hurt Like This."
Yeah, and
it is a sort of a look at how grief changes over the course of time and how we can learn to carry it more easily.
Okay, so if you could go back, even though I think I have an idea what you might say, but if you could go back to when you were 25 years old and give yourself one piece of advice, what would it be?
Oh man, there are so many that are broadcastable. 25. I don't think I would change anything. The only thing I would love is for my 25-year-old self to feel as confident and as happy with herself as I am now at 48. So I guess that would be my pep talk to my younger self.
Okay. And what is your non-writing tip for writers? I always say this could be drink water, walk.
Well, cold water swimming. I know it's such a guardian answer, and I almost hate myself for being so evangelical about it. But it is so restorative. And yeah, if you haven't got a lake or a pond or something, cold showers do the same thing. It's magical.
And finally, actually, this will just lead on to the last question, because I'll always ask, where can listeners find you online? But Claire, you're everywhere, especially on TikTok.
I am everywhere but at my desk, Nadine. This is the problem. Yes, I am everywhere. I like TikTok, mostly scrolling. I scroll a lot, but I also like doing videos. I'm on Facebook, the Clare Mackintosh Book Club. If you want to come and talk about books, Instagram, Clare Mac Writes. But yeah, just Google me and you'll find me.
Can find you. How easy, before we say goodbye, how easy did you find, I say, transitioning over to TikTok and, I don't know, taking on board at like what's trending and then incorporating that and applying that to you as a writer? Because not everyone can do it. Not everyone's comfortable doing it. Not everyone really wants to do it. And I'm not happy to scroll, but you do it really well.
I do enjoy it. I always say to emerging writers, pick the channels that you naturally enjoy and are good at, and ignore all the others, because honestly, it is counterproductive trying to do a platform you're not comfortable with. It always feels cringy when you're watching it. It's uncomfortable to do. Just don't do it. If Instagram is what you love, then just do Instagram. Your readers will find you.
Yeah. I always say the same thing. I say, find the one that resonates more with you. You don't have to be dancing on TikTok if you don't want to.
No, I don't. And I don't do any dancing. I don't dance.
Don't dance.
Not in public, anyway.
She does cold water plunges. That's what Clare Mackintosh does. And on that note, just leaves me to say, Clare Mackintosh, thank you very much for being part of the conversation.
I loved it.
Thank you so much for listening to today's conversation with Nadine Matheson. I hope you enjoyed it as much as I did. Be sure to tune in every Tuesday for a brand new episode featuring more amazing guests. Don't forget to like, subscribe and leave a review. It really helps the podcast grow. And if you'd like to support the show, you can buy me a cup of coffee or sign up on Patreon. The links are in the show notes. And if you'd love to join the conversation as a guest, feel free to send an email to theconversation@nadinematheson.com. Thanks again for your support, and I'll catch you next time.